Hello and welcome to the live stream. We're once again in the shop. Did some cleaning up in here today, but I've been doing some cleanup past few days in here, making it starting to make it usable instead of just a pit of piled up storage everywhere. Anyway, we're in here today because it keeps raining outside, so we can't do it outside under the tree where we normally do live streams. But we're continuing on our journey to get to David and his mighty men and go from Abraham to David and his mighty men and learn the lessons from all the people along the way, both what they did right and wrong. I have to excuse my voice. I've been sick for a little over a week now. All right. Today, we're going to pick up. Last week we talked about Joshua becoming the commander. This week we're going to talk about them crossing over into the promised land. And then next week we're going to discuss the entire conquest. And conquest is a bit of a misnomer. We're going to get all on that later. But hopefully we can get all that done and basically cover the entire book of Joshua in 2 weeks. Move on to Judges. Might get done by the end of this year. Anyway, that's enough rambling about that. So after 40 years of wandering in the wilderness, the people that were all slaves that chose not to follow Jesus or God into the promised land the first time have all passed away, and a new generation has come up that have been raised in the Jewish, in the Hebrew way, the Jewish way, raised with the law. And so they've been raised up. They have their own identity as Jewish or as Israelites, and they're no longer the people that were slaves in Egypt. They're a new type of people, and they get to the promised land. Got a bit of a drip. Anyway, they get to the promised land, the edge of the promised land, and Joshua, the leader that took over after Moses, goes to them and says to consecrate themselves. For tomorrow the Lord will do amazing things among you. So he tells them to go and clean themselves and prepare their heart, physically clean themselves. And as part of that is a metaphor for the spiritual cleansing of themselves, to get spiritually ready and physically ready to go enter into the promised land. And so we need to take that to heart too. God wants big things for everybody in their life. Now, for some people, those big things are to have the #1 podcast in men's Christian podcast. Some people, it's to be a great preacher and baptize thousands of people. For others of us, it's just to be a good neighbor, a good father, and a good husband. We all have our roles and what God wants to do, and even those smallest roles are great if you're doing them for the glory of God. And we need to constantly be preparing ourselves for the next thing God has for us, both physically preparing ourselves and preparing our hearts and our souls to follow God. So then when they get to the Jordan, they prepare themselves to go down to the Jordan River, and they're getting ready to cross the Jordan at flood stage. You don't cross a river in ancient times. I mean, if you've played Oregon Trail, you know about this. There was fords. There's places that are narrower and shallower and easier to cross, that you cross rivers. And you don't cross those rivers when they're flooded. Now, they're crossing the Jordan not at a ford, not at a recognized crossing place, but they're also crossing at flood time, so they're doing the most dangerous way to cross a river. And I don't know what's going on, but the neighbor down the street, he's beating his mailbox with a rake. He hit it a couple of times. Anyway, the reason they're doing this is because the reason God wants them to cross at this particular time in this particular way is because he wants to show his glory to them and show that if God can conquer a river, he can conquer anything. God can control a giant, massive river at flood stage, at its most dangerous. Then nothing's too dangerous for him to control. So they grab the ark. They're carrying it the way that God through Moses commanded them to, and they walk down to the river. And as soon as the priests get into the water, as soon as their feet touch the water parts, and they can walk across on dry land, showing that God can do this. So as leaders of our families, we need to be the priest of our families, of course, and we need to be leading our families to follow God in the way God commands us to follow him, and living out a godly life to lead our children and our wives in that direction. Also, as servant leaders of the communities we're in, we also need to be setting the example like the Levites did and going forward in a godly way and following God, going with God. So most of the Israelites followed God, but the priests, they went with God. We need to be both following God and going with God. That makes sense. All right. I already talked about that. All right. So as they're crossing, Joshua tells each of the leaders of the 12 tribes to grab a stone out of the riverbank. And after they cross the river, they build an altar with those 12 stones. And it's an altar to as a marker point. It shows the point where they crossed into the promised land. But what it also does is when people come by it, they'll ask, like when children come by it or strangers or visitors to the area come by it, they'll be like, hey, why are these 12 stones piled up like this? And the people can say, that is where God led us into the promised land. And God fulfilled his promise to our ancestors that we would have this land. And that's something we should to mimic in our lives. So I don't mean necessarily picking up 12 rocks and making an altar. We should be careful making altars. But we should be gathering stuff and remember it. So I got this out here. So this is a candle holder from, I believe it was from Sarah and I's wedding, and I hot glued it to this reef. And this sets at the corner of the cabinets in the kitchen, so you can see it from all the common areas of the house. And it's gotten dusty, needs cleaned. But in it are some rocks. Down here, there's some seashells. There you can kind of see them. Some seashells, and there's even a bolt in there. So I can't tell you where all these rocks and seashells are from. I know one of the seashells and one of the rocks is from the Indiana dunes when we went there as a family trip. Some of the rocks are from when we went to go to my cousin's house and visit them as a family to see the eclipse. There's another rock in here from the Boy Scout camp where our family, my family growing up, went to as scouts, and now my family's going to on scouting adventures. And the bolt, they were doing construction down the street, and we ran over that giant bolt. And me and Sarah together dug that out of the car tire and plugged it with 5 plugs because we didn't have the money to go get a new tire right away. With 5 plugs in one hole, and that held until we could go get a new tire put on the car. So these are all family memories, and me and Sarah have only been married for 3 years. So over time, this will fill up, and we'll have to start another one. And we can point to this and talk to the kids and remind them of the adventures and fun things we do as a family. And the bolt in here, when the family was facing hard times, God helped us out by letting that tire hold air with 5 plugs in it until we could afford a new tire. And that we're blessed to be able to go on these trips and do fun things together as a family. Something else we're doing is putting up, so Sarah's late husband, her first husband, he had some, he was really big into Marvel and those kind of things. So, and that's the boy's father. So we're going to take some of his t-shirts and we're going to put them in quilting hoops things or some other frame. We're not 100% sure. We like the idea of those because it'll hold it fairly tight. And we're going to take those and put them up as artwork on the walls. So the kids can remember that, and and Sarah can remember that. And we're going to put some remembrance things for me and my late wife, April. Also, like in my tool bag here. So my grandma worked at NISCO, the Nishwaaka Standards Company, and Topeka. She worked there for several years, and I worked there for like about a year. Well, we were cleaning out my grandma's house so it could be sold, and I found this in it, and they were just going to throw it away because to them it's not meaningful, but for me it's meaningful because this is my grandma spent a lot of time there, and this helped my grandma pay the bills and feed her family, and this same company helped me pay the bills and feed my family. And so I keep, the little tool bag. That's what it was used for there, and it's still getting used for that to this day. And every time I look at it, it reminds me of my grandmother and the sacrifices she made and the sacrifices I made for our families. And then one last thing along this line. So we do a lot of camping as a family. I wish Daniel would do more camping with us, but he's a little old for scouts when me and Sarah first started dating. And then he's definitely too old now, being 20. But over the 4 years we had these tents, we did enough camping that we wore some tents out. And this is the guideline from one of the guidelines from it. And it's nice and bright green. It's got retro-reflective silver in there. So we're going to take and cut these down to about a foot long with a knot on the end. And we're going to keep these in our camping kits. So if you have to go off the trail or you need to mark something, we have these. And every time we use them, it's a reminder of all the good camping trips and stuff we had. So what I'm getting at is we need to create family reminders of the blessings we have as a family, the blessings to be able to do things as a family, blessed times when God provided for us, those kind of things, and have those memories around so we can teach our grandkids. So someday when the kids are gone out of the house, they're married and have kids of their own, and the grandkids come over to hang out with Grandpa and Grandma. Can't believe I'm going to be a grandparent someday. I'm getting old. I'm thinking about being a grandparent and looking forward to it, I guess. Anyway, they'll ask, hey, what's that jar full of rocks and bolts and seashells for? And we can tell them it's to remember all the good times we had as a family and all the times that God blessed us. And we need to be doing that as a culture. I wish we did that more as a culture. Leaking again. I have the vent open, but it's not supposed to leak through these vents like that much. But I don't know. Anyway. So once they make it across the river, they all praise Joshua for leading them, and they revere him the way they revered Moses, and they sing songs about him the way they sung songs about Moses, and he becomes a leader like Moses. And like I described last week, Joshua is the same Jewish word we get. It's transliterated from the same word that we transliterate Jesus from, and he led the Israelites into the promised land that God promised them in the Middle East, and it's described as a land flowing of milk and honey. It's a land full of resources and plenty for them, where if they follow God's law, they can be happy. And Jesus, it's a metaphor, it's a type, it's a shadow of what Jesus is going to do fully for us. Jesus will, if we follow him, he will lead us into the ultimate promised land, into heaven. And we need to do a good job of being servant leaders to help others, to help lead others in that direction. And we need to lead our families and those around us in that direction. And we also need to recognize the people around us that are helping lead ourselves and others in that place. Priests and deacons and elders and elders that are outside the church, like your father or your wise uncle, or that wise guy that wise guy. No, that wise guy that you can go to for advice. So I hope that helps you and gives you something to think about. I know it gave me some stuff to think about for the next few days and some things that I can do better. We need to do a better job of collecting stuff when we go out on adventures. And I need to do a better job of getting some of the other memorable stuff up and where it's easily seen, so we can remember our past and where we came from, and remember that no matter how bad things have gotten in our lives, that God has provided for us. So if you like this kind of talk, if you like homesteading, preparedness, or living out God's mission, if you like these live streams or anything like that, come join me on Telegram to have a discussion about it. I want it to be a two-way conversation. Subscribe, all the YouTube stuff's great and helps me out and helps others see this. But I want to have a relationship and a conversation and learn from you as you guys learn from me. And the best way to do that is to have a conversation over at Telegram. There's a link in the description. You can search on Telegram for Prepare to Prosper, or you can go to the link t.me/prepare to prosper. And I'm glad I'm wrapping things up because the rain's getting really loud. I don't know how loud it is for you guys, but it's really loud in here for me. So remember, we prepare today so we can prosper tomorrow.